Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're in text 48. Maitreya Vacha Ta Atma Yoga Pataya Adhirajena Pujita Shilam Tadiyam Shamshanta Ke Bhavan Mishatam Rinam. The great sage Maitreya continued. Being thus worshipped by Maharaj Prithu, the four Kumaras, who were masters of devotional service, became very pleased. Indeed, they appeared in the sky and praised the character of the king, and everyone observed them. Purport. It is said that the demigods never touch the surface of the earth. They walk and travel in space only. Like the great sage Narada, the Kumaras do not require any machine to travel in space. There are also residents of Siddhaloka who can travel in space without machines. Since they can go from one planet to another, they are called Siddhas. That is to say, they have acquired all mystic and yogic powers. Such great saintly persons who have attained complete perfection in mystic yoga are not visible in this age on earth because humanity is not worthy of their presence. The Kumaras, however, praise the characteristics of Maharaj Prithu and his great devotional attitude and humility. The Kumaras were greatly satisfied by King Prithu's method of worship. It was by the grace of Maharaj Prithu that the common citizens in his domain could see the Kumaras flying in outer space.
49. Mainyastu durya mahatam samsitya dhyatmat shikshaya aptakamam ivatmanam mena atmanya avastitaha. Amongst great personalities, Maharaj Prithu was a chief by virtue of his fixed position in relation to spiritual enlightenment. He remains satisfied as one who has achieved all success in spiritual understanding. Remaining fixed in devotional service gives one the utmost in self satisfaction. Actually, self satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to desire, he is fully satisfied with himself. Similarly, a devotee who has no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as self satisfied as the Supreme Lord. Everyone is hankering after peace of mind and self satisfaction, but these can only be achieved by becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. King Prithu's statements in previous verses regarding his vast knowledge and perfect devotional service are justified here, for he is considered best amongst all Mahatmas. In Bhagavad Gita 9:13, Sri Krishna speaks of Mahatmas in this way: Mahatmanastu Mahapartha Devim Prakritim Ashrita Bhajante Ananya Manaso Gyatva Bhutadim Avyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. The Mahatmas are not under the clutches of the illusory energy but are under the protection of the spiritual energy. Because of this, the real Mahatma is always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Prithu Maharaj exhibited all the symptoms of a Mahatma, therefore, he is mentioned in this verse as Dhuryo Mahatam, best of all the Mahatmas.
Karmani cha yatha kamam yatha desham yatha balam yathochitam yatha vittam akarud brahma satkritam. Being self-satisfied, Maharaj Prithu executed his duties as perfectly as possible, according to the time and his situation, strength and financial position. His only aim in all his activities was to satisfy the absolute truth. In this way, he duly acted. Purport. Maharaj Prithu was a responsible monarch, and he had to execute the duties of a Kshatriya, a king, and a devotee at the same time. Being perfect in the Lord's devotional service, he could execute his prescribed duties with complete perfection, as befitted the time and circumstance and his financial strength and personal ability. In this regard, the word karmani in this verse is significant. Prithu Maharaj's activities were not ordinary, for they were in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Rupa Goswami has advised that things which are favorable to devotional service should not be rejected, nor should activity favorable for devotional service be considered ordinary work or fruitive activity. For example, an ordinary worker conducts business in order to earn money for his sense gratification. A devotee may perform the same work in exactly the same way, but his aim is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Consequently, his activities are not ordinary. Prithu Maharaj's activities were therefore not ordinary, but were all spiritual and transcendental. For his aim was to satisfy the Lord. Just as Arjuna, who was a warrior, had to fight to satisfy Krishna, Prithu Maharaj performed his royal duties as king for the satisfaction of Krishna. Indeed, whatever he did as emperor of the world, of the whole world, was perfectly befitting a pure devotee. It is therefore said by a Vaishnava poet, Vaishnavera Kriya Mutri Vignena Bhujhaya. No one can understand the activities of a pure devotee. A pure devotee's activities may appear like ordinary activities, but behind them there is profound significance, the satisfaction of the Lord. In order to understand the activities of a Vaishnava, one has to become very expert. Maharaj Prithu did not allow himself to function outside the institution of four varnas and four ashrams. Although as a Vaishnava he was a Paramhamsa, transcendental to all material activities. He remained at his position as a Kshatriya to rule the world and at the same time remain transcendental to such activities by satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Concealing himself as a pure devotee, he externally manifested himself as a very powerful and dutiful king. In other words, none of his activities were carried out for his own sense gratification. Everything he did was meant for the satisfaction of the senses of the Lord. This is clearly explained in the next verse.
Param Brahmani Sanyasya Nirvisanga Samahitah Karmadhyaksham Cha Manvana Atmanam Prakrite Param. Maharaj Prithu completely dedicated himself to be an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, transcendental to material nature. Consequently, all the fruits of his activities were dedicated to the Lord, and he always thought of himself as a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of everything. The life and dedication of Maharaj Prithu in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead serve as a good example of Karma Yoga. The term Karma Yoga is often used in Bhagavad Gita, and herein Maharaj Prithu is giving a practical example of what Karma Yoga actually is. The first requirement for the proper execution of Karma Yoga is given herein. Phalam Brahmani Sanyasya or Vinyasya. One must give the fruits of his activities to the Supreme Brahman, Parabrahman, Krishna. By doing so, one actually situates himself in the renounced order of life sannyas. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 18.2, giving up the fruits of one's activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called sannyasa. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam sannyasam kavayo vidu sarva karma phalatyagam prahustyagam vichakshana. To give up the results of all activities called renunciation, tyag by the wise, and that state is called the renounced order of life, sannyasa, by great learned men. Although he was living as a householder, Prithu Maharaj was actually in the renounced order of life, sannyasa. This will be clearer in the following verses. The word Nirvisangha, uncontaminated, is very significant because Maharaj Prithu was not attached to the results of his activities. In this material world, a person is always thinking of the proprietorship of everything he accumulates or works for. When the fruits of one's activities are rendered to the service of the Lord, one is actually practicing Karma Yoga. Anyone can practice Karma Yoga, but especially easy for the householder who can install the deity of the Lord in the home and worship him according to the methods of Bhakti Yoga. This method includes 9 items: hearing, chanting, Remembering, serving, worshipping the deity, praying, carrying out orders, serving Krishna as friend, and sacrificing everything for him. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. These methods of Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are being broadcast all over the world by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Anyone can learn these methods simply by following the examples of the members of the society. In one's home or in a temple, the deity is considered the proprietor of everything, and everyone is considered the deity's eternal servant. The Lord is transcendental, for he is not part of this material creation. The words Prakriti Param are used in this verse because everything within this material world is created by the external material energy of the Lord, but the Lord himself is not a creation of this material energy. The Lord is supreme, superintendent of all material creations, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.10. Maya Dakshina Prakriti Swayate Sasjarachara Hetu Nane Kaunteya Jagat Viparivartate. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings, and by its rule this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. All material changes and material progress taking place by the wonderful interaction of matter are under the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Events in the material world are not taking place blindly. If one always remains a servant of Krishna and engages everything in his service, one is accepted as Jivan Mukta, a liberated soul, even during his lifetime within the material world. Generally, liberation takes place after one gives up his body, but one who lives according to the example of Prithu Maharaj, is liberated even in this lifetime. In Krishna consciousness, the results of one's activities depend on the will of the Supreme Person. Indeed, in all cases, the result is not dependent on one's own personal dexterity, but is completely dependent on the will of the Supreme. This is the real significance of Phalam Brahmani Sanyasya. A soul dedicated to the service of the Lord should never think of himself as the personal proprietor or the superintendent. A dedicated devotee should prosecute his work according to rules and regulations described in devotional service. The results of his activities are completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord.
Text 52. Graheshu vartamanopi sasamrajya shriyamvita nasajatendriyartheshu nirahammatir arkavat. Maharaj Prithu, who was very opulent due to the prosperity of his entire empire, remained, remained at home as a householder. Since he was never inclined to utilize his opulences for the gratification of his senses, he remained unattached, exactly like the sun, which is unaffected in all circumstances. Purport. The word Griheshu is significant in this verse. Out of the four ashramas, the Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas, only a Grihastha or householder is allowed to associate with women. Therefore, the Grihastha ashram is a kind of license for sense gratification given to the devotee. Maharaj Prithu was specific in that although he was given license to remain a householder, and although he possessed immense opulences in his kingdom, he never engaged in sense gratification. This was a special sign that indicated him to be a pure devotee of the Lord. A pure devotee is never attracted by sense gratification, and consequently, he is liberated. In material life, a person engages in sense gratification for his own personal satisfaction. But in the devotional or liberated life, one aims to satisfy the senses of the Lord. In this verse, Maharaj Prithu is likened to the sun, Arkavat. Sometimes the sun shines on stool, urine, and so many polluted things. But since the sun is all powerful, it is never affected by the polluted things with which it associates. On the contrary, the sunshine sterilizes and purifies polluted and dirty places. Similarly, a devotee may engage in so many material activities, but because he has no desire for sense gratification, they never affect him. On the contrary, he dovetails all material activities for the service of the Lord. Since a pure devotee knows how to utilize everything for the Lord's service, he is never affected by material activities. Instead, by his transcendental plans, he purifies such activities. This is described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tat paratpena nirmalam. His aim is to become completely purified in the service of the Lord without being affected by material designations.
एवं अध्यात्म योगेन कर्माणि अनुस अनुसमाचरन् पुत्रान् उत्पादयाम आस पंच पंचार्थिष्य आत्मसम्मता. Being situated in the liberated position of devotional service, Prithu Maharaj not only performed all fruitive activities but also begot 5 sons by his wife, Archie. Indeed, all his sons were begotten according to his own desire. As a householder, Prithu Maharaj had 5 sons by his wife Archie, and all these sons were begotten as he desired them. They were not born whimsically or by accident. How one can beget children according to one's own desire is practically unknown in the present age Kali Yuga. In this regard, the secret of success depends on the parents' acceptance of the various purificatory methods known as samskaras. The first samskara, the Garbhadhana samskara, or child begetting samskara, is compulsory, especially for the higher castes, the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. As said in Bhagavad Gita, sex life which is not against religious principles is Krishna himself. And according to religious principles, when one wants to beget a child, he must perform the Garbhadhana samskara before having sex. The mental state of the father and mother before sex will certainly affect the mentality of the child to be begotten. A child who is begotten out of lust may not turn out as the parents desire. As stated in the Shastra, Yatha Yonir Yatha Bijam. Yatha Yoni indicates the mother, and Yatha Bijam indicates the father. If the mental state of the parents is prepared before they have sex, the child which they will beget will certainly reflect their mental condition. Therefore, understood by the words Atma Sammata, that both Prithumara and Archie underwent the Garbhadan purificatory process before begetting children, and thus they begot all their sons according to their desires and purified mental states. Prithumara did not beget his children out of lust, nor was he attracted to his wife for sense gratificatory purposes. He begot the children as a grahastha for the future administration of his government all over the world.
Text 54. Vijitashvam dhumarakesham haryaksham dravinam vrikam sarvesham lokapalanam dadharaika prithurgunam. After begetting 5 sons, namely Vijitashva, Dhumrakesha, Haryaksha, Dravina, and Raksha, Prithu Maharaj continued to rule the planet. He accepted all the qualities of the deities who governed all other planets. Purport. In each and every planet, there is a predominating deity. It is understood from Bhagavad Gita that in the sun, there is a predominating deity named Vivashwan. Similarly, there is a predominating deity of the moon and of the various planets. Actually, the predominating deities in all the other planets are descendants from the predominating deities of the sun and moon. On this planet, Earth, there are two Kshatriya dynasties, and one comes from the predominating deity of the sun, and the other from the predominating deity of the moon. These dynasties are known as Surya Vamsha and Chandra Vamsha, respectively. When monarchy existed on this planet, the chief member was one of the members of the Surya dynasty or Surya Vamsha, and the subordinate kings belonged to the Chandra Vamsha. However, Maharaj Prithu was so powerful that he could exhibit all the qualities of the predominating deities in other planets. In the modern age, people from Earth have tried to go to the moon, but they have not been able to find anyone there. What to speak of meeting the moon's predominating deity? The Vedic literature, however, repeatedly informs us that the moon is full of highly elevated inhabitants who are counted amongst the demigods. We are therefore always in doubt about what kind of moon adventure the modern scientists of this planet Earth have undertaken.
गोपीथया जगत्श्रेष्ठः काले स्वे स्वे च्युतात्मकः मनोवाग्वृत्तिभिः सौम्य गुणैः संरञ्जयन् प्रजः. Since Maharaj Prithu was a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to protect the Lord's creation by pleasing the various citizens according to their various desires. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj used to please them in all respects by his words, mentality, works, and gentle behavior. As will be explained in the next verse, Prithu Maharaj used to please all kinds of citizens by his extraordinary capacity to understand the mentality of others. Indeed, his dealings were so perfect that every one of the citizens was very much satisfied and lived in complete peace. The word Achyutatmakaha is significant in this verse, for Prithu Maharaj used to rule this planet as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He knew that he was the representative of the Lord and the Lord's creation must be protected intelligently. Atheists cannot understand the purpose behind the creation. Although this material world is condemned when it is compared to the spiritual world, there is still some purpose behind it. Modern scientists and philosophers cannot understand the purpose, nor do they believe in the existence of a creator. They try to establish everything by their so called scientific research, but they do not center anything around the supreme creator. A devotee, however, can understand the purpose of creation, which is to give facilities to the individual living entities who want to lord it over material nature. The ruler of this planet should therefore know that all the inhabitants, especially human beings, have come to this material world for sense enjoyment, and therefore the duty of the ruler to satisfy them in their sense enjoyment as well as to elevate them to Krishna consciousness so that they can all ultimately return home back to God. With this idea in mind, the king or government head or the government head should rule the world. In this way, everyone will be satisfied. How can this be accomplished? There are many examples, like Prithu Maharaj, and the history of his regency on this planet is elaborately described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Even in this fallen age, if the rulers, governors, and presidents take charge of Prithu Maharaj's example, there will certainly be a reign of peace and prosperity throughout the world.
Rajite adang namadheyam somaraja ivapara suryavad vishrajan grenan pratapamscha bhuvorvasu. Maharaj Prithu became as celebrated a king as Somaraj, the king of the moon. He was also powerful and exacting, just like the sun god, who distributes heat and light and at the same time exacts all the planetary waters. Purport. In this verse, Maharaj Prithu is compared to the kings of the moon and sun. The king of the moon and the king of the sun serve as examples of how the Lord desires the universe to be ruled. The sun distributes heat and light and at the same time exacts water from all planets. The moon is very pleasing at night, and when one becomes fatigued after a day's labor in the sun, he can enjoy the moonshine. Like the sun god, Prithu Maharaj distributed his heat and light to give protection to his kingdom, for without heat and light, no one can exist. Similarly, Prithu Maharaj exacted taxes and gave such strong orders to the citizens and government that no one had the power to disobey him. On the other hand, he pleased everyone just like the moonshine. Both the sun and the moon have particular influences by which they maintain order in the universe, and modern scientists and philosophers should become familiar with the Supreme Lord's perfect plan for universal maintenance.
दूरदर्शस्तेजस्वाग्निर्महेन्द्र इव दुर्जयः दीक्षया धरित्रीव द्योर इवाभीष्टदो नृणाम्. Maharaj Prithu was so strong and powerful that no one could disobey his orders any more than one could conquer fire itself. He was so strong that he was compared to Indra, the king of heaven, whose power is insuperable. On the other hand, Maharaj Prithu was also as tolerant as the earth, and in fulfilling various desires of human society, he was like heaven itself. It's the duty of a king to give protection to his citizens and to fulfill their desires. At the same time, the citizens must obey the laws of the state. Maharaj Prithu maintained all the standards of good government, and he was so invincible that no one could disobey his orders any more than a person could stop heat and light emanating from a fire. He was so strong and powerful that he was compared to the king of heaven, Indra. In this age, modern scientists have been experimenting with nuclear weapons, and in a former age, they used to release Brahmastra, but all these Brahmastras and nuclear weapons are insignificant compared to the thunderbolt of the king of heaven. When Indra releases a thunderbolt, even the biggest of hills and mountains crack. On the other hand, Marapitu was as tolerant as the earth itself, and he fulfilled all desires of his citizens, just like torrents of rain from the sky. Without rainfall, it's not possible to fulfill one's various desires on this planet. As said in Bhagavad Gita 3:14, Parjanya Anna Sambhava, food grains are produced only because rain falls from the sky. And without grains, no one on the earth can be satisfied. Consequently, an unlimited distribution of mercy is compared to the water falling from the clouds. Maharaj Prithu distributed his mercy incessantly, much like rainfall. In other words, Maharaj Prithu was softer than a rose flower and harder than a thunderbolt. In this way, he ruled over his kingdom.
Text 50. वर्षति स्म यथा कामं पर्जन्याम् एव तर्पयन् समुद्र एव गर्भोऽथा सत्त्वेनाचलाराद् इव. Just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires, Maharaj Prithu used to satisfy everyone. He was like the sea in that no one could understand his depths, and he was like Meru, the king of hills, in the fixity of his purpose. Maharaj Prithu used to distribute his mercy to suffering humanity, and it was like rainfall after excessive heat. The ocean is wide and expansive, and it is very difficult to measure its length and breadth. Similarly, Prithu Maharaj was so deep and grave that no one could fathom his purposes. The hill known as Meru is fixed in the universe as a universal pivot, and no one can move it an inch from its position. Similarly, no one could ever dissuade Maharaj Prithu when he was determined.
Dharmaraj iva sikshayam asharye himavan iva kuvera iva koshadya guptartho varuno yatha. Maharaj Prithu's intelligence and education were exactly like that of Yamaraj, the superintendent of death. His opulence was comparable to the Himalaya mountains, where all valuable jewels and metals are stored. He possessed great riches like Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly planets, and no one could reveal his secrets, for they were like the demigod Varunas. Yamraj or Dhamraj, as a superintendent of death, has to judge the criminal living entities who have committed sinful activities throughout their lives. Consequently, Yamraj is expected to be the most expert in judicial matters. Prithu Maharaj was also highly learned and exceedingly exact in delivering his judgment upon the citizens. No one could excel him in opulence any more than estimate the stock of minerals and jewels in the Himalayan mountains. Therefore, he is compared to Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly planets. Nor could anyone discover the secrets of his life any more than learn the secrets of Varuna, the demigod presiding over the water, the night, and the western sky. Varuna is omniscient since he punishes sins. He is prayed to for forgiveness. He is also the sender of disease and is often associated with Mitra and Indra.
Shall we stop the, I'll stop the recording.